So this morning we are going to be, if you have a chumash, we're going to be at Vayeshev, which is 226. The book of Genesis, this is all about, I discovered this is all about three. So the book of Genesis is divided into three. The beginning stuff, the beginning chapters set the universe for us. And then the core of the book of Genesis is the tales of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The last third of the book of Genesis is a novella. It is a fully self-contained literary unit around the career, life, and adventures of a man named Yosef. Yosef, you'll discover in a moment, is Yaakov's son, Jacob's son. And the story of Yosef is its own sort of literary narrative. And there are many ways of reading this, because like every great piece of literature, it's heavily overdetermined. There's many different motivations of the storyteller. But it appears to me, and you know, this isn't original, but it appears to me that what's being discussed here in the story of Yosef is the question of how one reads history. How do you find God in history? Because one of the things you're going to discover is that God disappears. The same God who was so visible in the Abraham stories, telling him what to do. The same God who was so visible in the Yaakov and the Jacob stories, telling him when it's time to go, when it's time, you know, blessing him. The same God who's going to be ultra visible in the Moshe stories, starting in the book of Shemot, not here. It's not here. You keep waiting for him to show up, for God to say, you know, do this, do that, but he's not there. He's not there. Well, the question is, where is he? And you know the story. I mean, the storyteller of the Bible knows that you have some familiarity with how this is going to end up. The question is, how did we get there? How did we get there? And how does the character of Joseph lead us into a very interesting and very strange journey? You're going to see this character in today's Torah portion. It's the story of descent. It's a geographic descent from the heights of Shechem, the heights of Dotan, the hill country of Eretz Yisrael, down into Egypt, down into the Nile Valley, and then eventually down into prison. The story is going to begin with a young man who thinks that he is God's gift to the world. And it's going to end with that young man in prison, forgotten, alone, in exile, far away from anything of value. And now that descent, and you're going to ask yourself, what's the purpose of that descent? Where is it going? But the bigger picture, come in. Ribola, come in. There's a chair. All right, come. All right, there's a seat there, there's a seat here, whichever one your ticket says. Right? Go ahead, take the seat. It's good. It's a good seat. Good. My friend went to go see, Bart Piccino works with me. He went to see Hamilton the other night. And during the performance, the National Weather Service issued one of these red flag warnings, and like every phone in the theater went off at the same time. Like, that happens. The question's going to be, what's going on? What's the bigger picture of history? Now, remember, I've talked about this before. Remember that these stories were told by generations and generations of Israelites. But they were assembled into a Torah narrative in the conditions of exile. By the waters of Babylon we sat and we wept. And the exiled community asked themselves this question: how do I see God in my own experience? Where is God in my history? Is there a divine hand? Is there a godly hand that is guiding the experiences of my history? How do you see that? How do you perceive that? Because we don't live in a time when a voice comes from heaven and says, I'm watching you. That would be, frankly, a little scary. But can you see some sort of divine plan at work in your own experience? That's the great question of the Joseph narratives. That's the great question of theirs. My teacher, David Hartman, used to talk about upstairs and downstairs history. Downstairs history is our experience of the flow of events that we all experience. It's the things that happen to us day to day to day to day. And they happen, and some of them are benign, and some of them are dangerous, and some of them are difficult, and some of them are wonderful. And we go through this experience day to day. And some days you finish the day, or some weeks you finish the week, and you breathe a sigh of relief. And some weeks you finish the week, and you say, my God, what's just happened? And we have this flow of events. Every now and again, you can climb up to a higher level and perceive the broader landscape of your experience and say, that's what's going on. That's what's really going on. You have this wonderful expression in Yiddish, the expression of beshert, right? What is beshert? Beshert is what Rabbi Shoais used to call post facto determinism. Post facto determinism is you look back and you say, it's a good thing that I didn't get that job because the job I ended up getting was a much better job. It's a good thing that I missed that appointment because I ended up marrying the girl of my dreams and I wouldn't have met her because I got on the wrong elevator. It's a good thing. And that notion of looking back. Now, it works if it's good stuff. If it's bad stuff, it's not so good, No one says it's a good thing I got sick. But sometimes you say, when I learned from that experience, you look back and you can gain some sense of the overall plan at work in your experience. That's what the story of Joseph is about. And for an exile who's sitting by the waters of Babylon wondering, have I been abandoned by the God of my ancestors? Or is this too somehow part of the plan? That's a great question. And for a modern Jew whose experience is the most radical gyrations in all of Jewish history, from Holocaust to the rebirth of the state of Israel, it's the same kind of a question. Is there a God? Is there a plan? Is there something guiding the historical experience of my people? It's a very, very powerful question. That's the question at work in the story that we're about to read. That's really the deep question. And at what point do the characters come to realize that something is going on and it's not just of their own making? Joseph realizes this before his brothers do. He'll realize it at a certain point. So at a certain point, I'm going to ask you the great Watergate question. What did he know and when did he know it? Okay? What did he know and when did he know it? And what does it look like from the character's point of view? And what does it look like from the reader's point of view, which is God's point of view? And what does it look like from this deeper point of view? Where is the plan? Let's take a look together. You ready? Everybody good? Everybody having? Okay, we're on page 226. Okay? Now, Rabbi Gelman is here this morning, as you probably noticed. And I'm delighted you're here. And he sent me a beautiful midrash. Actually, he sent it last year, which I enjoyed last year, but he did make sure that I saw it again. And it's a beautiful midrash. So when we get to that point in the story, I'm going to ask him to share it because it's a brilliant and a poetic reading of the story. Jacob, Vayeshev Yaakov, be'eretz migurei aviv, be'eretz Canaan. Jacob settled down. Rashi, the great commentator, echoes the midrash when he says, when a man settles down, he figures, okay, the adventure of my life is over, right? I mean, think about what this poor guy's been through. The conflict with his brother, 20 years with Laban, 4 wives, 13 children, right? The attempted rape of his daughter, right? You think that by now he's ready to retire and play a little golf? He goes to what are those places that where you, Del Mar, what is it you go to? Del Rey, Leisure World, right? He'll wear polyester and white shoes and walk around and eat at Denny's at 4 o'clock. Vayeshev Yaakov, he settles down. He figures all the adventure that I'm going to experience is done. It's done. God says, not so fast. Right? Ela toldot Yaakov. But now it only begins. He doesn't know that it's only beginning. Right? Yosef ben Shvaz Shana. Yosef was 17 years of age, and he tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. Who is Yosef? Now remember, there are 4 wives, remember? Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. We get that right? Every time you marry, if you're an upper-class fellow, don't try this at home. When you marry, you get a lady-in-waiting as well as the wife. That was allowable. It gave a woman of a lower social status the opportunity to live and be taken care of, to live in the home and to be taken care of by a wealthier man of higher status. So each of the wives comes with a Bilhah and Zilpah, are the two, they call them handmaids. It's ladies in waiting. It's the extra wives. Come, Mickey, there's a seat right over here. Come on, come on.
Thank you.
Of course. It's an honor to have you here. Come, please. Come in. Shabbos, please. Okay? And Neil has a chumash for you. Right? The guy who carries my chumashim is a full professor at UCLA. Douglas, give this to Mickey. Oh, you want to share this with her? And share this with Judith. Neil, one more over here. Thanks. Good. So who is Joseph? Joseph is whom? Son of whom? Rachel. Who is Rachel? The favored wife. Where is she? She's dead. How did she die? Giving birth to Benjamin. Giving birth to Benjamin. So Jacob, who spent his whole life madly in love with this girl, has only two things left in the world of her, Benjamin and Joseph, right? Joseph's 17. Who does he look like? Rachel. He looks a little bit like Rachel. So when he looks into the face of his young teenage son, he sees the wife that he loved his whole life and missed, and misses now. And so there's a connection, right? Now, he goes out and he's a helper to the sons of his father's wives. It's interesting that he's a helper to Bilhah and Zilpah. Jerry, why is he not a helper to Leah's wives? To Leah's kids?
Because that's still an unresolved issue.
Right. The 4 sons of Leah, or the 6 sons of Leah, still hold the resentment that she was the unfavored wife. Their names hold that resentment. Remember? Reuven means, my husband will see me and love me. Shimon means, my husband will hear me and love me. Levi means, my husband will come and be with me. It isn't until she gets to Yehuda that she says, to hell with him, thank you God, So the sons of Leah carry the resentment, but the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah are not as difficult, so that's where he hangs out. And Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father. Anyone here have a bratty younger brother? Right? This is the story of bratty younger brothers, right? Now, you'll notice something in each of the transactions, and there's going to be 3 of them in the course of the Torah portion. Here, when he's with his brothers, when he gets to Egypt in the house of Potiphar, and then when he gets to prison at the end of the Parsha, he becomes the head guy. He's in charge, or at least he puts himself in charge. And the question is, how does he comport himself when he's in charge? Now, Israel loved Joseph better than all the other sons, for he was the child of his old age. And he made for him an ornamented tunic, ketonet pasim, a coat of colors, technicolor coat of colors, a coat of stripes. We'll come back to that detail a little bit later. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than they hated him. They couldn't speak a friendly word. Now, so number 1, they hate him because he's already favored, right? And then what does the bratty younger brother do? Okay? Right? He has dreams. Once Joseph had a dream. Now, this notion of dreams is very interesting. The Bible understands dreams as portents of things to come. You just have to figure out what they mean. These dreams aren't too hard to figure out what they mean, Dr. Freud. And they hated him even more. He said, hear the dream which I've dreamed. We were binding sheaves in the field, and suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright, and your sheaves gathered round and bowed to my sheaf. It's one thing to have egocentric, infantile, egocentric, arrogant dreams. It's another thing to go blab them to everybody, right? So, don't do that. All right? And so you can imagine his brothers answered, do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us? And they hated him even more. And then he said another one. I mean, he doesn't get enough. And he said, look, I have another dream. This time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. Who's bowing down to him? The whole cosmos. Sun, moon, and 11 stars, his mother, father, and his brothers, right? The whole cosmos. His mother's dead, but that doesn't matter. In a dream, she's always alive, right? And when he told it, his father berated him and said, what is this dream? I and your mother, your brothers are bowed down to you? So his brothers were wrought up. They were angry at him, and his father kept the matter in mind. Well, we have a picture of infantile egocentrism, arrogance. Yes, please.
But what isn't noted in any of this is any discussion about birthright.
Yeah.
After all that previous...
Yeah. We don't have it. The presumption is that the law of the land is primogeniture, right? But we know that that's a problem in this family, right? This family has a nasty habit of messing with the firstborn, and we'll see that in just a minute. It's coming, I promise you. One time, when his brothers had gone to pasture their flocks at Shechem, where does he live, by the way? Where do they live? Where does Jacob live? He lives in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, which is in the south. Where is Shechem? Nablus. Today it's called Nablus. It's in the upper West Bank. In other words, they went north to right at the edge of the hills to shepherd their flock. Israel said to Joseph, your brothers are pasturing at Shechem. Come, I will send them to you. A wise thing to do? I'll send you to them. I will send you to them. A wise thing to do? Why not? Because what? Because they hate him. Does Jacob know they hate him? Does he want to know they hate him? Is he trying purposely to ignore how much they hate him? Does he assume that even though they hate him, they wouldn't do anything to him because he's still the favorite son of the father? This is a guy who spent 20 years of his life running from his murderous brother. He didn't figure this out? Or is there some sort of go reconcile with your brothers? Is that why he sent them there? Or having heard the last dream, does Jacob say, get out of the house? Go to Shechem. Just get out of my face for a while. Anyone ever say that to their kid? My mother we used to fight like hell, and my mother would say, get out of the house. Just go, put on a sweater, but get out of the house. Right, Mom, where should we go? I don't care, she'd say. Just get out of the house. I'm tired of you guys fighting. So we all went outside, And fought. No, we did fine in the world. My brother got a PhD, Yeah.
I'm looking at the word hate.
Hate?
Sifu.
Yeah.
Isn't that a play on Joseph's name?
Where is it? What verse you?
Where's right at the top of 228.
Yeah.
Yosefu.
No, Yosifu owed. That means they kept doing it. Yosifu owed sino oto.
It also says.
Yeah, Yosef. The name Yosef means to keep doing something, right? Because Rachel had Yosef and she named him. Oh, I want more kids. That's what the word Yosef means. I want more kids. Okay.
They're
right?
using it as a pun on his name.
It could be using as a pun on his name, but it's a commonly used word to mean he went on to do something else, or they did it more. They did it again.
Because it also is used in they hated him even more.
Yeah, they keep hating him more and more. The idea is that the hate is building upon itself.
Verse 4.
I don't know if you've ever been angry at somebody and you repeat the story. Every time you repeat the story, you get 10% more angry. Then you repeat it again, because each time you repeat the story, you tell it better. Do you really want to know what he did to me? Do you really want to know what he did? You really want? Yeah, there's a way of telling it, in my family. Not in your families. You have normal families. I live in a Jewish family, so we can recite grudges going back 500 years. Really want to know what they did? Don't ask, which means we forgot, but we know we're still mad at them, right? But these guys know. So there's this rage in the family. This is a hell of a picture of your family, folks. This is you. This is a Jewish self-portrait. We just understand what's being put here. When I take pictures of my kids on vacation and, you come home and you look through the pictures, you throw out the ones that are out of focus or they're making fun of each other, they're sticking tongues out and giving rapid. You keep the nice ones in the family album, right? Anyone ever do that, right? You ever look at a high school yearbook? Makes it look so idyllic. I hated high school. But my high school yearbook, it may even convinces me that I might have liked it. But because they take all these beautiful pictures of everybody looking so nice, and everyone's chummy and sweet and kind and well-dressed. And, why does the Bible put a picture of us? This is a self-portrait. As this contentious, angry, hateful people. This is a self-portrait of the Jewish people, and not a very flattering one. It's going to get worse, wait. Right? All right, one time when his brothers had gone to pasture their foxes, some of your brothers are pasturing, go, I'll send you to them. He said, Hineni. Hineni always means something momentous is about to happen. And he said to him, go see how your brothers are, how their flocks are. Bring me back word. What's that mean? Bring me back word. He doesn't trust them. He wants to know. It's a little strange, right? He puts him in charge. He's a spy on his brother. You get the picture? So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. When he reached Shechem, when he gets to Shechem, no brothers. But there's a guy there. This is kind of strange. Rabbi Gelman sent me something very, very lovely that he wrote some years ago. This guy is the most important guy in all of Jewish history. And he's not even named. It says, a man came upon him wandering in the field. Remember last week when Jacob sends his family across the river and he stays on the other side, and the next line in the Torah is, a man came and wrestled with him, and we had a long argument about who that man was. Who's this guy? Here's a guy, it's the same guy. No, it's exactly right. Do you ever have a person who's standing at the crossroads of your life who tells you go that way? Right? You know, in The Wizard of Oz, it's Ray Bolger, right? If she goes the other way, he never gets to the Emerald City. She never gets to the Emerald City. She never meets the wizard. He says, go this way, right? A man is standing there. What if that guy's not there? Or what if he doesn't talk to him? Or what if the guy bends over to tie his shoe at that moment? Or what if, what happens? If that guy's not there, Joseph doesn't find his brothers. Joseph doesn't find his brothers. What does he do? He goes back home. He goes back home. His brothers never sell him into slavery. He never gets sold into slavery. He never saves Egypt. He never saves Egypt. We never go down into Egypt. We never go down into Egypt. There's no Exodus. There's no Exodus. There's no Mount Sinai. There's no Mount Sinai. There's no Torah. There's no Torah. There's no Jewish people. There's no Jewish people. There's no Valley Beth Shalom. There's no Valley Beth Shalom. I'm out of a job. What am I getting up early on a Saturday morning for? It's this bastard's fault, I could have been sleeping in. I mean, you realize that this is the guy that shapes all of Jewish history. And what does he say? They went that way. You know who this is? It's Tonto, Remember Tonto? Yeah, Kimosabi, Yes, please.
You could always be a comedian and then stay up late Saturday night.
Ah! My calling has arrived. My calling has arrived. Oh my God. So here is the man who shapes all of Jewish experience. And all he says is, what are you looking for? Remember I told you, always look for the question? Always look for the question in the text. The question of the text is, Ma tivakesh. What do you want out of life? What do you want out of the world? What are you looking for? What do you really want people to bow down to you? Is that really what you expect of the world? What do you want? That's the question. And he says, I'm looking for my brothers. Now consider that forget the context for a moment. What a remarkable statement. I'm looking for brothers, right? Ma tivakesh. Efohem, right? Anochi mivakesh, right? Et achai anochi mevakesh. It's a very archaic language. Because you would in contemporary Hebrew, even in biblical colloquial Hebrew, you would say it differently. Right? Achim ani mevakesh. My brothers I'm looking for. Et achai anochi mevakesh. I'm looking for my brothers. Just think, what is he looking for? I'm looking for somebody to attach myself. I'm looking for someone who will be with me, on my side, who will share my existence. That's what the whole Torah is about, right? Every brother's looking for the real brother. Not the one who wants to kill me, the one who wants to be my brother. He says, I heard them go, we're going to Dotan. What was Dotan? It was the caravan trading point. It was the place where the caravans came out of the hills down into the valley. Okay? And they saw him from afar. Now, if you're coming from Shechem down into Dotan, you can see him coming because he's coming down a hill. Okay? Dotan is the spot that spot at the bottom of the grapevine when you've gotten down into, before you hit Bakersfield. There's a big gas station there. That's what Dotan is. It's the biggest truck stop in all of ancient Israel. I'm not kidding. It's where the caravans came down out of the hills and across the plain to go to the coast and down into Egypt. That's Dotan. It's the truck stop. So they saw him from afar. They can see him coming down. How could they see him? because he's wearing this technicolor coat. Right, right. And they said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Come on, let's kill him. Let's kill him and throw him into the pit. And we can say a beast has devoured him. It's not exactly untrue, right? We'll see what comes of his dreams. Now, here, Billy, here's your firstborn. When Reuven heard of it, he tried to save him. Why? Because he's the oldest. He has some sense of responsibility for the youngest one, right? The problem with Reuven is he's a lot like Hamlet. He can't make a decision and act on it. He makes a decision, and then there's a delay, and a delay, and a delay, and then he gets to it eventually. It's the delay. It's the Hamlet story. He can't fulfill his plan. If he was really a firstborn, he would say, don't touch the kid, you'll have to deal with me. And the brothers would back off. But he's not that boy. There's a weakness in his soul. Shed no blood, cast him into the pit in the wilderness, but don't touch him. What's Reuven's plan? Intending to save him and restore him to his father. Don't kill him, just put him in the pit. They said, we'll kill him and then put him in the pit. What did Reuven said? Just put him in the pit. What was Reuven's plan? Sell him later. Save him later. Get him. Save him, right? So what did they do? They grab him and they strip him of his tunic and they took him and cast him in the pit. It says the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So he didn't drown, but he's sitting in the bottom of this pit. Now, this theme of being thrown downward, that's the Joseph story. He goes from being the sun, moon, and stars bowed to me to being alone in the pit. And you got to ask yourself, what are his thoughts alone in the pit? Now comes the interesting part. I'm going to ask Rabbi Gelman to take this part. They sat down to a meal. Now, tell me about these guys. Your brother, your baby brother, is in a pit in the desert, dying of thirst. There are snakes and scorpions and spiders and mean things in that pit, right? And and he's screaming for help. And what do you guys do? You sit down and have a burrito. Pass the hot sauce. You get the picture here? This is such an ugly picture of us. What's wrong with you people? Where is your brotherly solidarity? Where's your pity? Of course his father loves him more. He's what's left of the favored wife. He has no mother to protect him. Jacob had a mother to protect her. Remember? Esau was the father's favorite. Jacob was the mother's favorite. Right? Same thing in the next generation. Yitzchak was the mother's favorite. But Joseph has no mother. She's gone. There's no one to protect him. But these guys, they sit down and have a meal. It's just something so callous about this. You get the picture? Then Judah said to his brothers, I got a better idea. I mean, leaving him to languish in the pit, that's no fun. Killing him, that's ugly. Here's the most cynical idea of all. Let's make a few bucks. What do we gain by killing him, covering up his blood? Let's sell him. Let's sell him. I tried selling my brothers. I did. I waited for a caravan to pass through Canoga Park. And I waited and waited for a caravan to pass through Canoga Park. I put up a big sign. No one wanted them. No caravans came by. No one wanted my brothers. Now we're close. I'm glad I didn't sell them, right? Here, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, but not do away with him ourselves. After all, he's our brother, our flesh. Now listen to the next text. Just read it carefully. His brothers agreed. His brothers agreed. Now, Ishmaelites, and now we got another group of guys called Midianites, right? When Midianites traders passed by, they pulled Joseph out of the pit. Who's they? The brothers? The brothers? The Midianites or the Ishmaelites? You don't know. Somebody pulled Joseph out of the pit. There are three possibilities, right? It's an Ishmaelite caravan, there's Midianite traders, and there's brothers. All right? Possibility number one. Who could it be that pulled him out of the pit? The brothers. They see the caravan, right? And they hand them to the Midianites to either hand them to the Ishmaelites, or the Midianites are irrelevant. They hand them to The brothers sell him into slavery. That's possibility number one. Possibility number two is the brothers are eating lunch, and what they don't know is that the Midianites are going by, and the Midianites see a kid in a pit, and they pull him out. So that when the brothers go to the pit, what do they find?
Nothing.
Nobody. Where did he go? We don't know where he is. Right?
Good excuse.
Not a good excuse. It's actually the truth. They don't know where he is, right? Third possibility is the Ishmaelites come along. So we don't quite know who sold him. They sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who brought Joseph to Egypt. We got Ishmaelites, Midianites, and brothers. All right, Rabbi Gelman. Rabbi Gelman has a suggestion to make about this text, which is poetic and lovely. Go ahead.
Well, my side business is to write modern midrash. It has the same financial benefit as people who want to revive the sonnet. But for me, midrash is the essential Jewish art form and theological form. It's not a sermon. A sermon is, we have the story of Joseph, now let's talk about Trump. That's a sermon. A midrash has no contemporary implications. It's about digging into the text. And if the text is from God, that digging is a spiritual act. And so, what was troubling to me in my capacity as Midrash editor of Moment magazine, Wiesel and Leonard Fein, who started the magazine, wanted Midrash, so I began writing Midrashim for children and adults. And I was always concerned about the dynamic of the covenant. Why is it that one is chosen and one is cast out? Isaac is not the firstborn, but Isaac is chosen and Ishmael is cast out. Why does the covenant not follow the rules of the land? And why must one always be cast out? So, the Torah has a clue that this moment of the sale of Joseph is actually a nodal moment in Jewish history. The first clue is the man in the field. This is not a man, and the word Hineni once did a midrash tracking every use of Hineni, and you're exactly right, as you frankly always are. That every use of Hineni is a portentous use. And in fact, the final use of Hineni is Isaiah 58, which we say on Yom Kippur, is a Haftorah, in which it's the only time God says Hineni to people. The only time. You will call and I will answer you on that day, the final day. Hineni, I am here. So for me, the issue is that there's some clue in here. And no one saw the clue. But the clue is 39:1, where it says, and I'll read it in case, I have this predilection that I refer to the Torah by chapter and verse. Here at Valley Beth Shalom, we refer to the page number printed in Eitz Chaim, which is, I'm sure, more pleasing to God. But I use the actual chapter. So when Joseph was taken down to Egypt, Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh and his chief steward, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had brought him there. Well, that would be fine. The Ishmaelites sold him to Potiphar. It's very simple. The problem is that we have 37:36. The Midianites, meanwhile, sold him in Egypt to Potiphar. This isn't a little contradiction. It may seem like a small story, but it's a major contradiction. In one verse, it's the Ishmaelites who sold him to Potiphar, and in the other, it's the Midianites who sold him to Potiphar. To me, this is the only clue I needed to spend years figuring this out, because I have no life. And here was my answer. Ishmael awakened before dawn. He did not want death to catch him in his sleep. He wanted death, which was close to him at that moment, to take him while riding on his chief's camel, at the head of a great caravan, taking gum balm and Ladanum from Gilead to Egypt. He wanted to be struck down in front of his 12 sons, who were the living assurance that the Ishmaelites would be a mighty people for generations to come. Ishmael knew death was close, but did not want it to come to him in Canaan, the land of his father Abraham, the land given to his half-brother Isaac, the son of Abraham and Sarah. Canaan was not his land. That land promised to the descendants of his half-brother Isaac in the covenant between his father and his father's God, the covenant which took them in, had cast him out. And then there's the covenant in Genesis 17, 19 to 21, Sarah would bear his sons. Egypt was also not his land, but Egypt was at least the land of his mother Hagar. In Egypt, there was no covenant to cast him out. Who could understand the ways of the covenant? One chosen, one cast out. Though he was the firstborn, still Isaac was chosen, and he was cast out. From a distance he saw, and he knew that the ways of the covenant had not changed among the children of his brother Isaac. One chosen, one cast out. Esau was the firstborn of Isaac, and yet Esau's brother Jacob was chosen. And Esau was cast out. He had even heard rumors that the ways of the covenant were at work again among the grandchildren of his brother Isaac. Reuben was the firstborn of the 12 sons of Jacob, but Joseph was clearly the favorite and the chosen one. Joseph wore the coat of colors and was favored by his father in all things. Now Joseph's brothers feared that they too would become the victims of the covenant, the ones cast out, not the ones chosen. That's what they hated. That's what they feared, not the coat, the covenant. So the old man Ishmael asked Neviot, and the Torah confirms this, his eldest son, to prepare his chief's camel for one last journey into Egypt. As was his custom, Midianite traders were taken along to protect the caravan, scout the road, and deal in slaves, because, as my teacher Nelson Glick, may his memory be blessed, taught me, Ishmaelites never were slavers. And they were not because of the memory that Ishmael was the son of a slave. So, but they brought Midianites because slaves were a commodity. And the Midianite traders that were on their caravan, they dealt in slaves. And so they brought Midianites. At sunrise, Ishmael led the caravan away from Gilead to Egypt. He had in mind to camp at night at the small caravan town of Dothan that was on the road to Egypt. Jacob awakened before dawn. The death of love in his family would not allow him to rest in peace. He knew it was wrong to love one child more than the others. As a child, his father Isaac had loved his brother Esau more than him. And this unbalanced love had torn his family apart and caused him to flee his home for 27 years. Now he was a father of 13 children, and he had resolved never again to let anger, jealousy, and favoritism divide the house of Israel, but love has its own reasons. And he loved Joseph more than the others. No remembrance of past wounds could keep him from wounding his own family by his unbalanced love. Joseph was the son of his favorite wife, Rachel, and all of them, save Benjamin, were not. Joseph was obedient, they were rebellious. Joseph was quick, they were sluggish. Joseph remained with him in camp, they were men of the open fields. Joseph was himself as a child. and they were 11 Esau's. Jacob had given Joseph the coat of many colors as a sign of love, not as a token of the covenant. Nobody in the family understood this. The brothers knew the ways of the covenant, one chosen, one cast out. Grandfather Isaac chosen, granduncle Ishmael cast out. Father Jacob chosen, Uncle Esau cast out. They feared for their futures every time they saw the coat. The dream of the sun, the moon, 11 stars bowing down to Joseph, dream of the sheaves. They would kill him rather than become the next victims of the covenant. Jacob felt the anger of his sons, and in order to separate them from Joseph, he sent them to pasture his flocks in Shechem. After their anger had cooled, he intended to send Joseph to them in the hopes that away from his influence, the brothers might come to their own peace. In such a way had he become reconciled with his own brother Esau, who was the one who attacked him and wrestled with him. The brothers left before dawn, heading with the flock towards Shechem. But to throw off their father and to prevent the little pest from following them, they headed north, away from Shechem, to the little caravan town of Dothan, which was on the road to Egypt. Joseph awakened before dawn. The dreams awakened him from his sleep. The dreams were always the same. The dreams of binding sheaves, the dreams of the sun, moon, and stars. He was scolded for telling these dreams to his brothers, but he still dreamed. You cannot stop a dream. Joseph's dream life and his waking life were at war within him. While awake, he was an obedient brother and son, but in his dreams, he was another person. Hatred of his father's evanescent love, envy of his brother's physical prowess, and the great injustice of one so bright as he submitting to a family of those so much less gifted. All these feelings surfaced without restraint in his dreams. His father chided him about the meaning. Shall I bow down to you, I and your mother? No, he answered. No, father, no. While awake, yes, yes, you shall bow down to me, he said in his dreams. That morning, Jacob called to Joseph and said, go find your brothers in Shechem. Joseph did not find his brothers. What are you looking for? They seek my brothers. Joseph did not find his brothers in Dothan, but he met his brothers in Dothan because the many-colored coat could not be mistaken. They saw him coming from afar. Perhaps he had not been wearing, if he had not been wearing the coat, he could have arrived unnoticed, and perhaps their anger would not have enough time to brew into murderous rage. First, they tried to kill his dreams by killing the dreamer. They said, here comes that dreamer, let's kill him. Then cunning altered their anger. Reuben, the eldest, knew that he would be the one to have to face their father and tell him the story. And in Hebrew, murder is shvichas damim, spilling blood. And the father would ask him, did you spill his blood? And all he cared about was not saving, that's an interpolation. All he cared about was being able to say to his father, we did not shed his blood. So he devised a plan that would enable him to lie. And then finally their greed prevailed. Ishmael, riding on his chief's camel and trying not to show the pain that pierced him with every bump and jolt of the journey, was the first to reach the brothers. Immediately he recognized them as the grandchildren of his brother Isaac, because, and this was the key to unlocking the entire story, Esau, Jacob's brother, was Ishmael's son-in-law. Esau had married Mahalat, his daughter, to appease his parents. And in this way, Esau kept Ishmael informed about the doings in the family of his brother Jacob. This was the duty of a son-in-law, but it was also the duty of another victim of the covenant. The brothers, for their part, did not recognize Ishmael. This was not strange. Jacob never spoke of him. For had he done so, he would have had to speak of how Esau had married Ishmael's daughter, and then he would have had to explain again how he had stolen the birthright and the blessing from his brother Esau. You do not say these things to your children. You do not remember these things. Some family secrets are best buried. And Jacob did not teach his sons about the other parts of the family, because the ones chosen rarely spoke of the ones cast out. So Ishmael knew them, but they did not know him. The brothers invited Ishmael into their tent. They offered him food, and they offered him a boy to sell as a slave in Egypt. The food was free. Price of the boy, 20 pieces of silver. Ishmael kept his anger to himself. He thought, the children of the chosen ones are now slavers. He did not explain to the brothers that because his mother Hagar, the concubine of their grandfather Abraham, had been a slave who had come up out of Egypt, he would never be a party to bringing another person down into Egypt as a slave. He simply accepted the food, refused the slave, and rose to leave. Then suddenly, Ishmael caught a glimpse of something colored in the corner of the tent. That was the purpose of the coat, to give a clue to Ishmael about who the boy was. He could hardly breathe. It was the coat of many colors. Mahalat had told her father, Ishmael, about the coat of many colors. Her husband Esau had told her that his brother Jacob had told him of the problems caused by giving Joseph that colored coat. In that moment, Ishmael knew the full extent of the evil that the brothers were plotting. He knew that they were selling their brother. He knew that God had placed them all at Dothan at that moment, but for what purpose? Ishmael was in a bind from which he could not easily extricate himself. If he revealed to the brothers his identity, they would have to kill him and Joseph to hide their crime. If he bought Joseph to save him from his brothers, he would be despised among his own family as a slaver. He would have betrayed his family's deepest commitment. Then Ishmael seized upon a plan. He paused and then told the brothers, I have with me Midianite scouts. They will come to you. They will buy the slave boy on my behalf. As Ishmael walked through the evening light away from the tent of the brothers and back to his own caravan, a stranger met him on the way. The same stranger who met Joseph wandering in the fields. The stranger asked Ishmael, Matvakesh, what are you looking for? And Ishmael said, I'm looking for my brother's son Jacob. I must warn him that his son Joseph is being sold as a slave to die in Egypt. The stranger told him, I will protect the boy, but not the covenant. Tell your brother Isaac and your nephew Jacob that today and forevermore the covenant has changed. Now, the one chosen is the one cast out. Ishmael was crying as he said to the stranger, now I can die in peace. And there passed by Midianites, merchants, and they drew Joseph out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. To the sons of Ishmael, the boy seemed to be the property of the Midianites, and they told the story that way. However, some Midianites knew, of course, that they had bought the boy for Ishmael, and they told the story their way. Both stories were true. Both stories were Devarim Acherim, different versions. Ishmael, for his part, intended to sell Joseph into slavery in the safest place in Egypt, the court of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's chief steward, a eunuch named Potiphar would surely buy the lad as a favor to Ishmael. Potiphar bought most of Ishmael's goods. And through it all, Ishmael never revealed to his sons the identity of the slave boy. Too much hatred still remained between his sons and the sons of his brother Isaac. And Ishmael feared for Joseph's life on the journey. Ishmael also could not reveal himself even to Joseph on the journey down to Egypt, for had he done so, Joseph would surely have pleaded with his great uncle to be set free. However, Ishmael knew that Joseph's brothers would then have to kill him before he returned home to protect the lies that they would tell Jacob to cover their crime. Ishmael did let Joseph ride beside him on his chief's camel, which his sons thought was a bit odd, but they dismissed it as the idiosyncrasies of an old man. The next night, on the road to Egypt, Joseph was cold and afraid. The brothers had headed the flocks north, away from Dothan toward the valley of Hebron. They carried with them the coat of many colors that had the new color of goat's blood soaking into the other colors. The caravan of the Ishmaelites had headed west. On the road away from Dothan, they went down to Egypt. That night, Ishmael sat with Joseph and told him stories about Egypt, stories he had heard from his mother Hagar. The stories eased Joseph's fear in the night. Ishmael sang songs to Joseph, songs from Egypt, songs he had heard from his mother Hagar. The songs sounded familiar to Joseph, who was soon asleep. That night, the boy did not dream.
Very good. So we have I would get the idea is quite poetic. We have a covenantal pattern in 3 generations, right? One is chosen, one is cast out, okay? Which actually goes back a generation. Abraham is chosen, Lot is cast out.
That's right.
Right? Right? Then Isaac is chosen, Ishmael is cast out. Then Jacob is chosen, Esau is cast out. Okay? And then that's what the brothers worried about. They worried that Joseph would be the chosen one, and they would be completely cast out of the family, rejected. Okay? And so they grabbed the kid to kill him. And Ishmael, now there's no coincidences in the Bible, Ishmael shows up. And Ishmael realizes what's about to happen. And it's Ishmael, the grandfather and the granduncle, the great-uncle, who rescues him. Who rescues him because this now changes the pattern. Now the pattern is the chosen one is the one who's cast out. Now why would that story be told? Because it's told by an exiled people, right? An exiled people were sitting in Babylon by the waters of Babylon, wondering why was our temple destroyed and why were we cast out? Wonder, are we still the chosen ones? And they needed a story to assure them that you can be the chosen one and still be cast out. And that's why the story is inserted into the Torah. And Ishmael does this. I mean, this is the brilliance of this midrash. By carrying out this drama, Ishmael finally gets closure. Right? Ishmael finally realizes his role in the covenantal drama, that he too is a tool of God's will in the covenantal drama, not just his brother Isaac, but that he too has a critical role to play in carrying forward this history, right? And he whispers all of the traditions of Egypt into the boy's ears, which is going to prepare him for the rest of his life. And that's why it's a beautifully poetic midrash. That's a very nice midrash. Very nice. Thanks so much. Yeah, you still got it. How do you like that?
High, hard one.
At this age, you still got it. I mean, amazing. Holy cow. Now listen, I mean, come on. I mean, you know, it's truth is truth here.
Isn't Gelman dead yet?
Right. Almost. He's in California. That's what they say in New York. You know, almost. He's in California.
I got letters all week from people seeing if I was dead from the fires.
Oh,
They
gosh.
said, Bet you missed the New York winters now.
I want to suggest one more idea. Can we have time for one more idea before we conclude? Thank you so much. It was just really beautiful. Oh, it's just beautiful. So I want to go back to this idea at the beginning that the purpose of this story, Rabbi Gelman's part fits beautifully into this. The purpose of this story is to answer a question that Jews have asked in every generation, particularly every generation of the diaspora, which is, how do we see God's hand in our history? Are we still part of a divine history? Or to put it in the metaphor that I used before, is there an upstairs to this history? If we were to go upstairs and look at our history, would we see some sort of divine pattern to the history? That, to me, is what the real question is here. What Rabbi Gelman has given us a juicy detail in which there's not only an upstairs to the history, but all sorts of loose ends of the cast-out brothers come back to bind up the story. But I want to take a look at one other aspect of that idea. If you believe that there is some sort of pattern to history, the question is, what motivates it? And here's the question. In the Greek tradition, everything is governed by fate, right? Oedipus is the drama of Oedipus, if you remember that from high school. The drama is carried forward because that's what the fates decreed before he was born, that he would come back and marry his mother and kill his father, and tragedy would ensue. In the Greek tragedy, the tragic element of the character is built in. Achilles' arrogance, Oedipus's fate, this sort of stuff. I want to suggest that the Bible introduces an idea, and it's not sure, but it's messing with the idea, and you can see it here. And the idea here is that characters change. People change. We are not fated to be the same people in every episode of our lives, but it's actually possible for a human being to slowly and indelibly change the character. We saw this a little bit with Jacob. Jacob begins as the arrogant trickster. For Jacob, Jacob is the man who loves things and uses people. He uses his brother, he uses his mother, he uses his father, and then when he goes to Uncle Laban, he gets used. And slowly he begins to change the way he looks at the world. And we saw last time we looked, the two brachot, or the two prayers that he makes, rather. The prayer that he makes when he first leaves home, when he's sleeping on that rock in Bethel, and he says to God, give me everything I want, I'll give you 10%. He's still the handler. And at the end of the story, when he's facing the terror of his death at the hands of Esau, he says to God, Katanti mikol chasadim, I'm too small, I don't deserve all the things that have happened to me. And you begin to see, maybe he's changing. And the funny thing about the name, you pointed this last week, is that Avraham remains Avraham. He never goes back to being Avram. But Yaakov alternates between Yaakov and Yisrael. Because when we change, we never change permanently. And we often revert back to the person we were before, even though we want so much to be the new person. The question I think that the Bible is interested in asking is, it's true that I see a divine hand in history. Is it related to the change in the character? Is there a correlative change in the character? And is that what motivates? In other words, we change history by changing our morality. We change history by changing ourselves. I want to take a very brief look, 5 minutes, no more, at 3 episodes in this week's Torah portion. And tell me what you think of Joseph now. Okay? Well, let's go back with me for a moment. Back with me at the beginning. Look at the dreams. Look at page 227. Look at the dreams. Right? He had a dream, which he told to his brothers. So it's one thing to have the dream, but it's quite a very different thing to broadcast it to the world. I would say tweet it, but that's now political. So, right? I mean, you can have all sorts of thoughts as long as you don't get on your tweet storm, right? Right? So he's got to tell them, you all stood up and bowed down to me. You had to tell them, I am the center of the universe, and the whole universe bows down to me. What's your picture of Joseph at this point? It's what the psychologists call infantile egocentrism. King baby, Freud called it. Everyone bows down to me. Everyone is my servant. Everyone, I am the center of the universe. And the coat is the symbol of that, right? The coat is this visible symbol. He literally wears his arrogance on his sleeve. We use that phrase in English, right? It's such a great phrase because wherever you go, you see this guy and his arrogance. That's how he begins, right? Now what's going to happen? He's going to be taken by his brothers, kidnapped by Ishmael, sold into slavery. Turn with me to chapter 39. Sold into slavery. He's going to end up in the house of Potiphar, who is one of the chiefs of the chief steward of the Pharaoh. Not a bad place to be. I mean, if you got to be a slave in Beverly Hills. Right? When Joseph, look on page 238. When Joseph was taken down to Egypt, a certain Egyptian Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh, the chief steward, bought him. And the Lord was with him, and he was successful, and he stayed in the house of the master. And when the master saw the Lord was with him, and the Lord lent success to everything he undertook, he took a liking to Joseph. He made him his personal attendant, put him in charge of the household. So first he's like the head guy in Jacob's household. Now he's the head guy in Potiphar's household. Do you think that these events changed him in any way? Do you think that he's beginning to be shaken from that arrogance, from that egocentrism, that I'm at the center of the universe? Well, look what happens to him. It's going to have an unfortunate event with Mrs. Robinson. Here's to you, Mrs. Potiphar. Jesus loves you more than you will know. No, no, no. God bless you, please, Mrs. Potiphar. Page 239. After a time, his master's wife cast eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Oy vey. Right?
To seduce me.
Mrs. Potiphar. Now remember, Potiphar is a saris. He's a eunuch, so that might have something to do with it. But don't go there. I don't want to be accused of anything terrible. But he refused. He said to his master's wife, listen to this. He says, look, with me here my master gives no thought to anything in the house, and all that he owns he's placed in my hands. He wields no more authority in this house than I. And he has withheld nothing from me except you. You are his wife. How could I do this wicked thing? He's protesting to the wife, but listen to the way he says it, right? I'm in charge of everything. I have more power in this house than the master. I'm the most important person in this house. It's true that it's part of the protest, but there's something deeply arrogant in this. You get it? Something deeply, I'm in charge of everything here. I'm the guy. It's my house. Listen to what he says. No, not almost. Not almost. This is what he says to the wife. He, that's Potiphar, wields no more authority in this house than I do. I'm the equivalent of the master. The only thing in the whole house that I can't touch is you. And I'm not going to screw up this gig by touching you. But there's an arrogance to it there. Right? Hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. So where does he end up in the third episode? Well, in the third episode, and by the way, just to complete the story, when the master comes home and the wife says he tried to rape me, what do you suppose normally happened to a servant who tries to rape the master's wife? God only knows. First of all, so he only gets sent into prison, and not just any prison. He gets sent into prison where all of the federal officials go. This is minimum security tennis court prison. There's a prison in Arizona that's, it's what is it? Is that, Madoff is it? Yeah, they only have 10 tennis courts that are lit at night and it's
Club Fed.
There you go, Club Fed, that's what it's called. Now why do you suppose that's where he goes instead of being murdered, instead of being executed for touching the master's wife? Two reasons. One, Potiphar knows his wife. He knows her. He knows what she does. And number two, Rabbi Gelman's suggestion that Ishmael gave him to Potiphar and said, take care of my nephew. Take care of my nephew. And Ishmael was a very important guy in the world and doesn't want anything happening to this kid, right? So what happens? He's in prison. Now, you look at you see the descent from being the center of the universe to being the chief steward of the chief steward to being in the prison. But even in the prison, he becomes a macher. You know those kids in high school who were the president of everything? Did anybody have? You know, they were just the president of everything, right? Right? So what happens? In the prison? Right? It's on page 241. So Joseph's master had him put in prison, but not any prison, the prison where the king's prisoners were confined. And even while he was there in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. He extended kindness to him and disposed the chief jailer favorably to him. And the chief jailer put Joseph's charge all the prisoners who are in the prison. He's a macher even in jail, right? And he was the one to carry out everything that was done there. And the chief jailer did not supervise anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. They keep saying the Lord is with him, the Lord is with him, the Lord is with him. Does Joseph know that's why he's successful? Does Joseph know that? Or does Joseph just think, I must be pretty special if everywhere I go I get put in charge of stuff? But watch what changes now. So far we've seen the 2 episodes. Here's episode 3, chapter 40, page 242. Ready? Right. Sometime later, the cupbearer and baker of the king of Egypt gave offense. Pharaoh was angry, and they were put into the custody of the house of the chief steward in the same prison where Joseph was confined. If you're in the same prison where Michael Flynn is, you're in a good shape. Okay? I mean, that's the kind of prison it is, right? And that's who these guys are. The cupbearer was the national security advisor. And the baker was the secretary of the treasury. Right? So this is where Mnuchin and Flynn are going to spend some time. I'm not being political. I'm just discussing the Bible. I'm really not. I'm not. The chief steward assigned Joseph to them. So he's in charge of these 2 guys, right? That's his job, right? When they had been in custody for both of them, the cupbearer and the baker were confined to prison. They each dreamed the same night. They had a dream. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were distraught. He asked them, why you appear so downcast today? What's interesting about that question? Why are you so depressed today? No. What's interesting? This is the first time Joseph seems to care about anybody but himself. Isn't that interesting? It's the first time he engages another human being as the subject, not the object of his activities. You guys depressed? What's wrong? It's the first time he ever asks anybody what's wrong, right? He uses everyone. Just like his father. He uses everyone. But for the first time he says, what's wrong, fellas? And they tell him, we had dreams. So Joseph said, what? Now, what would you expect him to say? I know dreams. Tell me your dream. Let me tell you what. You tell me, I'll tell you what it means. That's what you'd expect him to say, right? Isn't that what he should say? What does he say?
All of it comes from God.
He says, surely God can interpret. Tell me your dreams. It's the first time he mentions God. It's the first time God comes into the story, by the way. Right? Right? So they have the dreams. Each of them gives them the dream. Right? Each of them gives them the dream. And then what happens? Right? He gives them the interpretation of the dream. But for the first time, Joseph says, this isn't me. I'm the vessel of something bigger. I'm the servant of something bigger. I'm involved in a drama that's bigger than me. And so you expect everything to change, but the rabbis who divide up the Torah portions, they do this just great. This is the greatest. This is one of the greatest, like, continued next week scenes in the whole Torah. Look on page 245, right? On the 3rd day of his birthday, Pharaoh made a banquet for all the officials. He singled out the chief cupbearer and the chief baker from the officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to cupbearing, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hands but the baker he impaled just as Joseph had interpreted. And you say, oh my God, that's great. And then the Torah says, nope. Yet the chief cupbearer did not think of Joseph. He forgot him. Now what's interesting about this, you got to know this. This is a little rabbinic clue. Every Torah portion ends on an up. You're not allowed to end a Torah portion on a down, on a depressing note. You're not allowed. That's why sometimes Torah portions end in the middle of chapters, because the rabbis would not let you finish Shabbos with this feeling of, ah! But this is the only one that ends on a down. It's the only one that he forgot him. So where is Joseph right now? Alone. The two fellas that became his buddies have been taken out. One restored, the other killed. He's alone. He starts out as the king of the world, and he ends up alone by himself in the pit. Being thrown in a pit is the theme of this story. The question is, if you're at the bottom of the pit, is that the end of the story? Or, you're all answering, right? Or is there something else about to happen? From upstairs history is at the beginning of the next set of drama. This is the only Torah portion that leaves you with, what? You left him there? You didn't give me something redemptive at the end? And the Torah says, no, you got to come back next week. Shabbat shalom.